Good night to all alternate viewers. Hoping you can hear me well. I am your host, Kemar Stuart, and we are live yet another Thursday on Alternate Views. So I want to welcome all the early Patreon viewers into the live stream. We had some early comments. Good Mr. Angel saying good evening, everyone. Trevor saying good evening, and Nigel Franklyn saying greetings, all alternate viewers. Welcome back. So yes, welcome back, everyone. Nigel, how are you doing this evening? Welcome to this evening's live broadcast.
Greetings, one and all. Thank you for having me once again. All is well, no complaints. Actually back home in Barbados for a little bit, so I have no complaints, man. Just giving thanks. Ready to get this evening session on the road. How are you doing, man? How was your week?
Well, I am fine. My week was okay, just trying to keep the progress going and to keep the good fight up. Um, had some time to prepare for this speech topic, which is called remote controlled governance, and you can see it right across the screen right here. So we're going to get into what is remote controlled governance, what that would look like. Um, as you know, alternative views we offer uh, local global context, you know, worldwide engagement. So we will be discussing tonight's topic along those lines. But let me welcome those persons who are going to come in. Um, we are very early in the show, so we want to give persons a chance to sign in so that we have a great discussion tonight. As usual, the show is not the show without the viewers, so therefore we want to give the viewers a chance to sign in this evening. Anything you want to share with us, Nigel, before we get deep into tonight's discussion?
I just take the opportunity to share the book I'm reading currently. As we alternate viewers are lifelong learners, and we always seek to gain knowledge, not just to know, but to have an understanding and apply it into the world. That's how now we become wise and get understanding. The book I'm currently reading is How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Walter Rodney, he was a Guyanese intellectual. Um, he's educated within the West Indies, and then he did some schooling in Africa, in Tanzania. He traveled back to Guyana later in his life to start a workers' union, and then he started a political party. Unfortunately, after he started a political party, the powers that be realized how influential and impactful this man Walter Rodney was, and unfortunately, they assassinated him. But in this book, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa, he laid out step by step how that underdevelopment happened and how, based on colonialism, imperialism, and somewhat neo-colonialism, how that impacts and affects small economies in Africa and the wider diaspora. So just sharing that bit of information with the alternate viewers. It's an amazing book. It's an amazing book.
Well, at some point in time, we should do a book review, much like what we do for all of our other authors. So we be tasking you with doing that book review and leading that discussion something very soon.
For sure. I definitely am down for that. I think that's a way to also garner and deepen your knowledge and conversation with other people and to teach it. So I welcome that. Absolutely.
Mm. No, we don't have our living Bible today, but what we have is access to the quarterly. So just wanted to share the Thursday message with you, 25th of September. It says about how Jesus tabernacled with humanity. Right? So it said that the incarnation of Jesus is a mystery as well as an exclusive science that the redeemed will study throughout eternity. And the Apostle John states that Christ, upon taking upon himself our body, revealed that he dwells with us in a tangible way. Jesus, here in the flesh, resembles the God of the Old Testament, who dwelt with the Israelites in the tabernacle at Sinai and in the wilderness as they journeyed to the promised land. And during his incarnation, Jesus tabernacled with humanity. So, what an unfathomable concession! The eternal God comes down to us as one of us in order to assure us that he truly is Emmanuel, God with us. And in Matthew 18, verse 20, Jesus say that if two or three are gathered in his name, he will be there among them. Christ is with his people through the presence of the Holy Spirit. Christ invites his followers to be in close relationship with him. Behold, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in to him and eat with him and he with me. Revelation 3, verse 20. And that's a very interesting way to start. Um, sure, just allow all and sundry to be aware that Christ is within us all, and he's here with us. And we need to look within lots more given the times that are happening. Like, um, if you look around the world, we had the UN vote this week where countries were voting against, Israel that we speak about. So these are some very interesting times. We even had online chatter about this week being the rapture and all. So very
That's a
interesting
very
topics.
very interesting topic indeed. Because I mean it come and gone. And I get that up, so boss.
Strange things.
Hmm.
So give me a random number.
87.
87. So 87, we are quoting from The Journey by Dr. Dennis Law. We're quoting from that book. Um, you said 87. However, the chapter starts at 86. But we're going to read um, in the first chapter of 87. It says, many of us live in a constant state of hurt and carry the burdens of the past on our back. We seem to lack the willingness and our understanding of how to deal with the many situations that have contributed to our personal hurting state. We bottle up the toxic feelings that rule our emotive energies, and we constantly pretend that all is well, though we know deep down inside that there is a continuous war going on. We fight with our with ourselves, even though we know that the war is really with those who have contributed to the hurt we feel. For many of us, the struggle for inner freedom is continuous. The hurt is at times too deep to even talk about, and the flight to freedom is repeatedly met with barrier after barrier. One of the reasons why we never seem to find our way out of our hurtful struggles is because we seldom seek to find the time to investigate the history of our hurts. And then when we do, we hardly find any answers. We become so possessed by the pain and the people associated with the hurt that we feel that we lose the will to fight and free ourselves. It is important to remember that the road to our inner healings begins with an understanding of why we are where we are in our lives and how we may have contributed to our present hurting state, and what is the most proactive process to pursuing our inner freedom. Knowing the real reasons why we hurt is absolutely essential to healing ourselves. The time must be taken to carefully probe the possible reasons why we are trapped in a life state of hurt and inner unrest, and what must be done to free ourselves. End quote by Dr. Dennis Law from The Journey, The Path to Finding True Self Meaning.
There's a phenomenal book and a phenomenal quote. Phenomenal quote. We could apply that to any level of society, whether the individual, whether the family, whether the nation, whether the world. You know, why? How are we acting out what we feel, and why are we acting out in such ways? That
Mhm,
is that is a passion of mine in terms of having one's really assess why and how they're acting in this world and whether or not they're acting in their benefit or in their for their destruction. You know,
mhm,
these are never light things or easy things to discuss. However, they're very important and necessary for one to self actualize in this world, especially during these times when we need all independent thinking, we need all authentic thinking to come to the board to really devise a different mindset, a different way of life. Because clearly the one we've been given and have been practicing isn't working anymore.
mhm. Very interesting. As you said, very profound quote by Dr. Dennis Law about what we contribute to the state that we are in, how we, you know, by our ways and means and ways of how we think, we actually put ourselves in a lot of hurtful situations, and then expecting, the glory and the glitz. So it calls for time to pause and to seriously self-reflect and to look at where you may be contributing to your own letdown and your own demise, and to actually work on it and try to turn around those fortunes. Nobody's perfect. We will all fall down at some point in time, but falling down does not mean the end. There's always the option of getting back up and pushing through the good days and the bad days. Recognizing that lifelong learning is associated with both the positive and the negative as one holistic learning experience. Yes.
Very well
So,
said.
yes, thank you very much, sir. So, the next topic, remote controlled governance. And what does that mean? What do you hear when you hear the term remote controlled governance? What does it mean to you? What does it mean for you? Like what crosses your mind when you hear the term remote controlled governance? Uh, I gotta let you take a shot at it first. Uh,
Okay.
mhm,
Just using my limited understanding of what each of those words means, remote controlled governance. Uh, like a remote control car. Something outside of the car is controlling it. It is being steered and driven by something beyond it. So, and adding governance means that some government or some type of entity is controlling something from afar. That's my understanding.
Mm. Okay, so you're not far off. As the term remote control, meaning um, electronic control, basically, or digital control of governance. So governance in this case could mean a system, and that is any system, not just government, but governance. As you know, in business, you have corporate governance, meaning the way how a corporation is run, right? How it functions. Then you can have government, the way how government is run. There's a governance structure associated with government, right? So we're looking at electronic structures and how these electronic structures will be responsible for what a future, not just Barbados, but what the future world will be like. So if you watch any of those futuristic movies, as you know, we like that term Back to the Future. If you watch any of these futuristic movies, you always see like digital societies. You will see flying cars, cars that don't use gas. You will see like green structures, like how the different cities are set up. So you see a lot of this futuristic technology in movies. Now, a lot of this technology is underpinned, right? It's underpinned by digital and electronic infrastructure, right? So to have digital and electronic infrastructure, you need electricity, and you also need water, right? So what many persons may not know is that the digital infrastructure is usually fed into electronic servers, and a lot of these electronic servers are actually stored under the sea, on the seabed, or it is stored in places where you can have access to water, right? So, for example, Nigel, you're a big fan of Ethiopia. Ethiopia is now constructing a water dam, right? A water dam. But what could be being left out in terms of information is that the control of water and the flow of water is being used to power what you call the electronic or the digital revolution, because these servers get hot and they need water to constantly be, cycling around it and circling in it to keep these turbines cool. As you can see, these turbines are running 24 hours a day. Um, Billions of users, and water is essentially needed to keep that flow going. Right? So those are two elements of the earth, which are current electricity and water, which should be needed. There's two key elements for this remote controlled government and remote controlled future that we are having. Right? Now, in a remote system, Nigel, it is being sold to the population about financial inclusion, right? Financial inclusion. So to give the average citizen or the average person a sense of belonging, you will say to them that we want you to be financially included and to join the digital revolution. So the digital revolution, one, is coming from financial empowerment, right? When everybody wants some level of financial empowerment, and also from the green energy perspective, right? The green energy perspective. So that includes solar panels, hydrogen powered cars, etc., etc., and a move away from fossil fuels and oil and gas onto renewable energy. If anybody listen to Donald Trump at the UN speech, Donald Trump said that the green revolution and climate change is one of the biggest hoax ever played out on mankind. Like, so what are your thoughts so far about what we would have said about the remote control system and the future of digital government and governance? Sorry.
Okay. I can just read. So I looked up the definition or a definition that was given online. The tool ChatGPT, tool that you just input information like a regular search engine, but based off your specified search, they would give you the info you're looking for. So they defined remote control governance as a concept that describes a system of governing where the actual power, direction, or decision making does not come from the people or institutions within the country or organization, but from external actors who influence or dictate the process. It is closely related to remote controlled government, but with a stronger focus on the processes and mechanisms of governance rather than just political leadership, which sounds exactly like what you just said in different terms.
Yeah.
Um, what I think about that is, and this may be quite controversial of an opinion, but here we are on alternate views. This is where these things are supposed to be discussed. I don't think there's anything we can do to stop it from happening. I think society at large has shown itself to be looking for the easiest and most effective way in doing things, not necessarily the right way of doing things, the easiest and most effective way of doing things. And to the majority of the youth coming up, it makes complete sense to go cashless. Um, Less hand to hand, more direct, better monitoring of all transactions that have happened and will happen. So I do think that it will go in that direction. What I think isn't happening though is proper education, proper preparation, proper awareness of what this means and what will happen and what is needed in order to survive or to be not left behind within this new digital and cashless revolution.
Hmm. All right. So alternate views the book. Alternate views the book. Don't forget to get your copies online. Alternate views the book at page 157. We spoke about financial sector growth, right? Financial sector growth. And I would have said at page 157 that the creation of an investment culture within Barbados is significantly restrained by a lack of foreign exchange available to undertake what we call cross-border investment above certain thresholds. So that's basically, sending money across different parts of the world above a certain threshold, right? So you remember we're solutions oriented and we're looking to build an investment culture. So the scarcity of the foreign exchange available, especially to the bigger players who would have the bigger vision, bigger money to do their expansive stuff, is hampering these players, uh, and they will need the investment, as I tell you, foreign exchange to lead economic development. So the concept of Barbadian companies, local companies, Nigel, expanding abroad into other foreign currencies and in countries that then allow for these particular Barbadians to repatriate funds and repatriate money back home into Barbados to build up our economy. I would argue that this is one of the main engines of growth that should be pursued by the Barbados government, right? Now, the government would have made our local government here in Barbados and in around the Caribbean would have made some investment into digital platforms, we call real-time platforms, to monitor transactions, hence, i.e., financial inclusion, like in the digital revolution. And banking institutions, digital credit unions, etc., all of them are moving on to these so-called digital real-time platforms to do transactions. So as opposed to having physical cash, like physical cash, you're being encouraged to move and to do online transactions. So for some years now we had credit cards. For some years now we had debit cards. Nowadays we have things like Cash App, First Pay, Central Bank of Barbados is Renault Senegal, Pay. Um, so you have all of these new digital payment apps and where money is being transferred again, all parts of the world in real time. Right? So to capture all of these transactions, the Central Bank of Barbados launched what we call Pay, which is basically like a digitization of the Barbados dollar. Right? So if you have a cell phone, you can download the Pay app, and vendors are supposed to have the Pay app, and you could do digital transactions with any vendor in Barbados online in real time without the need for hardcore cash. Right? If you don't have that facility, so you don't have a cell phone or so, then there's something called a digital wallet, right? A digital wallet, which will then be issued by the Central Bank of Barbados. Right? Now, eventually, right, eventually, under a remote control system, a remote control government, let me ask you this question: what is included inside a wallet? Or what's the purpose of a wallet?
Store money, for whole money, whole cards as a
Right?
primary function.
Right. So to hold money, to hold a driver's license, to hold cards, etc., etc. Right? The digital wallet will include the digital wallet will include your driver's license. It will also include your digital passport, right? Along with your medical records and all type of any type of government record that could be used to identify you. All of it will be stored into what you call a digital ID, right? So it may sound convenient, it may sound interesting, it may sound like yeah, but at the core of it, who controls the remote, right? Who decides, Nigel? One second. Right? Who decides, Nigel? Who's the controller of the remote when the country moves in a fully digital transaction era? Right? And is there any possibility of that digital system and transactions being turned off for people who the system would consider to be antisocial exhibiting antisocial behaviors, or doing anything against the powers that may be, or so. Is there any possibility? Do we have the electrical infrastructure? For example, how often does the current go off in Barbados? How often does the current go off in Caribbean? Right? Do locals own the utility companies? Do locals own the utility companies? Are the utility companies foreign owned? Right? Um, do we have access to enough water around Niger to be able to manage the level of digital infrastructure that would be needed to run these systems? Right? So those are just a few of the questions that I want to put. So let us discuss.
Hmm. This is a very interesting topic. Um, Knowing what I know, that's not necessarily the truth. We don't own that infrastructure. If we don't own the infrastructure, I don't see how we can sustain the infrastructure. And coming from a perspective of whoever owns that infrastructure, who that we buy into, if there is such a clause or an action that is made against that governance or that governing system, I don't see why they could just flip a switch and say, "All right, Barbados, you off until when it get right, you turn off."
Hmm.
You know, it may some would say truth is stranger than fiction, but that could be a more reality than you think.
So do you observe around any countries around the world um, where we live, or where the people, sorry, live on the digital system, the card system, where, for example, you can get, uh, if you violate any of the laws in society, you don't necessarily have to come court anymore, but the system or the state will just deduct the money from your bank account automatically,
Mhm.
right? If you owe money to any financial institution and there's money in your bank account, there's no need to enforce, to send the bailiffs or anything to just take it out of your account, right? And these are, as Ricardo says, already happening in China. Right? China has a social credit score system, which is very similar to what we discussed. So tickets for things like jaywalking, etc., etc. Um, I don't know how people in the Caribbean would fear, because we basically break all the traffic rules in
Mhm.
Barbados. People hardly ever cross at crossings, etc. But in other societies, if you do these things under this digital social credit score system, you're punished. Right? So in political systems like ours in Barbados, which gives basically dictatorship type powers towards a prime minister, right? More than likely the people controlling the remote, who has power over the remote, will more than likely be the politicians. Right? So how do we fare in a overly regulated society, Nigel, where political power is concentrated in the hands of a politician, right, who has the ability to turn on and off a digital system where people's lives are at the end of the system? How do you fear, or, well, let me not say fear, how do you see it? Do you see a positive outlook coming from it? Do you see a more negative outlook from it? Um, what, do you see any potential benefits that we could use from being under such type of system? And again, what downsides do you see from being under such a system?
That's a very loaded question. I can do my best to answer. No, there's good and bad to everything, if we can be honest. Now, what I think as it pertains to Barbadian society, if it is not, if our actual reality is not being taken into account in terms of the implementation and phasing in of this system, it will fail. If it's being received from powers that be or from orders on high and not taking into account what our actual society looks like, how our people actually live, how our people relate to each other, how business and commerce is done at a local level. All of the good intentions of the system, whatever they may be, we will not reap those benefits. I could see where people could say, well, everything is out in the light, everything is on Front Street. So there's that could end a lot of crime. It could open up avenues for people to make money. However, my personal point of view is that if we don't start by looking at what Bajan society actually is and Caribbean culture at large, the implementation of such a system or program will ultimately be to the detriment of the people. Right?
Hmm.
There's a lot of elders in society that are not necessarily technologically savvy. What do they do? How are they being taken account of? How are they phased in? Some of them are still workers. Some of them are entrepreneurs. They still rely on physical cash flow. A lot of them may still work on a trust system. Well, they can do this work here for you today. You can't pay me, but you can pay me at some other day. These are still actual realities for a lot of people. So, to iterate my first point, if these systems are being phased in to a country like Barbados without true acknowledgement of how we live and our true culture, it's going to ultimately fail.
Hmm.
What are your thoughts? What are your point of view?
Well, digitizing the processes of an organization could be very beneficial. So I basically ran a political party, and we integrated technology in a very serious way in how we manage and how this political party functions. So the technology is very beneficial to us as to how we run the party, right? So technology in of itself is not bad. However, you run the risk of, as it is technology, you run the risk of eavesdropping. You also run the risk of hacking. Right, 1 minute, please, 1 minute. Yeah, my apologies. Yeah. They also run the risk of hacking, eavesdropping, etc., etc. And you also run the risk of poor internet and Wi-Fi. They, you also run the risk of the electricity being off. Right? So without further inputs and without these structural inputs, um, these downsides will then come to the forefront. No, in terms of, let's say we use government, having online payment systems for things like driver's license is not so bad. It would actually cut down the amount of paperwork, and it would actually cut down, we get your ease. And if you have the facilities to do the online transactions, you just do everything online one time. Nothing wrong with that, right? A lot of these old paper processes of government could be digitized, right? Nothing wrong with that. No, I have a challenge now where your financial transactions in of itself um, become monitored by government, right? Become monitored by government. So a national payment system, which is very different to the a payment system like what we have right now by the private banks. So our credit card or debit card belongs to a private banking institution, and you give them your information, and you swipe online for whatever you want. And you could get physical cash still right now because physical cash is still a thing, right? Now we don't know what private banks do with our information, besides making profit. So the question comes up now: what would a government be doing with the collection of people's bank account information, right? Now, as somebody who studied banking and finance at university, right? If you give access to your banking information, right, you're put on full expose. So somebody could basically be seeing how much debt you have, and they could also be seeing the amount of savings that you have as well, right? So if all of these digital financial footprints, basically online, Nigel, you're on full expose here, as I tell you, for government services, not only government but hackers and other people. Your entire identity is a financial history, etc., etc. All of it is online, right? So if Nigel went and bought something that he would rather kept in private, and he went in a store, he bought it with physical cash. The government now knows what Nigel bought yesterday, right? And they want to know that one to know Nigel's patterns, and also for tax purposes to ensure that Nigeria is not doing any tax evasion, etc., and that they can keep up with his financial transactions. So there is a serious level of control. There's a serious level of intrusion into your privacy. But some people will say, that is the risk you gotta pay for inclusion or some type of semantical statement or so. But it comes back down to the point, as always, who will be the controller of the remote? I said, hey, who will be the controller of the remote? So it's like at some point in time, I believe that free and fair elections will come to an end around the world. Praying that it don't come that it doesn't come to Barbados. But let's just say we had digital dictatorships all around the world, where the people that are in power can't put them out of power, and they're fully in control over the system, right? Holding the remote. So they're basically controlling you. Now, as far as I know, only Lord God in heaven, Jesus Christ, right, is supposed to be the only person, you know, between man and himself that has that level of autonomous control, right? You are all born with freedoms, freedom of speech, freedom of association, freedom of Spain, all of these different acts and ideas. I know you have a ever-present monitoring system, which is much similar to what you call the powers of God. And
Omnipotence and omnipresence.
yeah, so you're my into the Bible. I'm into the Bible, and the Bible speaks to what you call the beast system, right? The beast system, and the beast system in Revelation speaks to not being able to buy and sell without the mark, without the mark. And the way we're heading now, it seems that, and I could see it online, where you will have chips in your hand, like digital chips. So there's no need for like passcodes, and you don't need to have all of this. If you go in the supermarket, you just swipe your hand, beep, and that pays for all your goods in the supermarket.
Have you ever seen a series that was on Netflix called Black Mirror?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay, I would encourage you to check it out. So Black Mirror is basically speaking about this Black Mirror, right? Our phones, TV, laptops, and each episode of this series goes into how our relationship with this Black Mirror technology, AI interfaces, how that can shape and affect society. Now, one of my favorite episodes was one where in the States, and I think similar to here now, there's some ride systems. In the States, it's Uber, Lyft. So in this episode, every interaction you have with an individual, you are rated on it. So let's say you order Uber, Kimar, and I'm your driver, and you do not have a good experience in my ride. You now get to vote stars. 5 stars being the best, 1 star being the worst. Now, the more stars that you accumulate, the better you live in this society. So it is positive reinforcement to do the best that you can or to offer the best service that you can. Now, there was a circumstance within the episode where, unfortunate circumstance happened, and this specific lady received less and less and less stars. The less stars you receive, the less grace you have in this society. You don't really matter if you don't have good stars. So that sounds exactly what you are describing, whereas you are completely monitored and rated within the system. And if you are an outlier, or antisocial, as you put it, you don't necessarily buy in to this digital wave. You will now be an outcast, and you will not matter in society whatsoever.
Hmm.
I think it's very funny how these shows and things are produced, and then it somehow reflects reality. There's an old saying or old question: does art imitate life, or does life imitate art? Uh, the lines, the more you look into it, the lines seem to be blurring because what you see in a movie, you could actually reference in real life. And what you references from in real life, you can see being acted out on the big screen. You know, very very interesting times we live in. Not hearing you if you're speaking.
Right. I wanted to show a quick video here, hoping that I can get that done, about what a word called dystopia, right? Dystopia. And this video is about recognizing what is dystopia, and what we consider to be a perfect world. So let us try to have that up here. Um, yes.
Have you ever tried to picture an ideal world, one without war, poverty, or crime? If so, you're not alone. Plato imagined an enlightened republic ruled by philosopher kings. Many religions promise bliss in the afterlife. And throughout history, various groups have tried to build paradise on Earth. Thomas More's 1516 book, Utopia, gave this concept a name, Greek for no place. Though the name suggested impossibility, modern scientific and political progress raised hopes of these dreams finally becoming reality. But time and time again, they instead turned into nightmares of war, famine, and oppression. And as artists began to question utopian thinking, the genre of dystopia, the not good place, was born. One of the earliest dystopian works is Jonathan Swift's Gulliver's Travels. Throughout his journey, Gulliver encounters fictional societies, some of which at first seem impressive, but turn out to be seriously flawed. On the flying island of Laputa, scientists and social planners pursue extravagant and useless schemes while neglecting the practical needs of the people below. And the Huinum, who live in perfectly logical harmony, have no tolerance for the imperfections of actual human beings. With his novel, Swift established a blueprint for dystopia, imagining a world where certain trends in contemporary society are taken to extremes, exposing their underlying flaws. And the next few centuries would provide plenty of material. Industrial technology that promised to free laborers imprisoned them in slums and factories instead, while tycoons grew richer than kings. By the late 1800s, many feared where such conditions might lead. H.G. Wells' The Time Machine imagined upper classes and workers evolving into separate species, while Jack London's The Iron Heel portrayed a tyrannical oligarchy ruling over impoverished masses. The new century brought more exciting and terrifying changes. Medical advances made it possible to transcend biological limits, while mass media allowed instant communication between leaders and the public. In Aldous Huxley's Brave New World, citizens are genetically engineered and conditioned to perform their social roles. While propaganda and drugs keep the society happy, it's clear some crucial human element is lost. But the best-known dystopias were not imaginary at all. As Europe suffered unprecedented industrial warfare, new political movements took power. Some promised to erase all social distinctions, while others sought to unite people around a mythical heritage. The results were real-world dystopias, where life passed under the watchful eye of the state, and death came with ruthless efficiency to any who didn't belong. Many writers of the time didn't just observe these horrors, but lived through them. In his novel We, Soviet writer Yevgeny Zamyatin described a future where free will and individuality were eliminated. Banned in the USSR, the book inspired authors like George Orwell, who fought on the front lines against both fascism and communism. While his novel Animal Farm directly mocked the Soviet regime, the classic 1984 was a broader critique of totalitarianism, media, and language. And in the USA, Sinclair Lewis's It Can't Happen Here envisioned how easily democracy gave way to fascism. In the decades after World War II, writers wondered what new technologies like atomic energy, artificial intelligence, and space travel meant for humanity's future. Contrasting with popular visions of shining progress, dystopian science fiction expanded to films, comics, and games. Robots turned against their creators, while TV screens broadcast deadly mass entertainment. Workers toiled in space colonies above an Earth of depleted resources and overpopulated, crime-plagued cities. Yet politics was never far away. Works like Dr. Strangelove and Watchmen explored the real threat of nuclear war, while V for Vendetta and The Handmaid's Tale warned how easily our rights could disappear in a crisis. And today's dystopian fiction continues to reflect modern anxieties about inequality, climate change, government power, and global epidemics. So why bother with all this pessimism? Because at their heart, dystopias are cautionary tales, not about some particular government or technology, but the very idea that humanity can be molded into an ideal shape. Think back to the perfect world you imagined. Did you also imagine what it would take to achieve? How would you make people cooperate? And how would you make sure it lasted? Now take another look. Does that world still seem perfect?
Hmm. Now, I hope you took in a lot what was said in that video, and I do. 'Cause that was a very interesting video, and it led on from the comment that you made about art and its imitation of life, or if life is an imitation of art.
Mm-hmm.
Eh,
Mm-hmm.
And
100%.